So Ilya, let's talk about the conference, our flagship event every year.
Okay, Greg. Great.
So why is it important, right? It's our most challenging effort on the calendar. It requires the most work, the most resources. It pulls everyone together for several months. Why do we take this time in this effort? Why do we hold this conference?
Yeah. I think an annual conference is important to organizations such as ours because it allows us to bring a wide community of people together, for one thing. And we do reach a lot of people throughout the US and Canada and Europe, et cetera. Certainly online in terms of online community, but also on site. People at our on-site conference came from all over. And it allows us to maybe present something on the big picture, because our webinars are topical, our courses are topical, but the conference is a different type of venue. It allows us to, the big picture is, what are we about? So I think the annual conference really relates to the mission and the vision of C4C, in its own existence. And so the conference to me is really important in building community and deepening our mission and vision, in enlightening others. This is what we're about, and it allows people to go home and say, wow, I never thought of the whole picture this way. And the question is always, where can I read more, or how can I deepen my understanding of these things? And so the conference is the big picture vision on a particular aspect of that vision that allows gathering, deepening, and enlivening, empowering that, in a world where we feel the news sometimes is so negative, the big picture vision says, don't get weighed down by the news, that God is doing new things, something new is emerging here. And it's our task to, in a sense, be conscious of it, to respond to it, to creatively move with it and flow with it into a new future.
Yeah, so this is really our Who We Are event, and sharing the uniqueness of C4C and our vision and what we're trying to say. We bring together theologians, philosophers, contemplative practitioners, so many others. We're a spiritual organization, but we believe our vision extends beyond traditional religious boundaries. Why is that key to our vision and such a core part of this conference?
Yeah, again, I think the Teilhardian vision and an incarnational vision, in my view, means that God is involved in every aspect of the world, right? God is involved in matter from, quarks and leptons upwards to humans. God is involved in soil and rocks and trees and sky and sun. God is involved in human community formation and human personhood. God is involved even when we're so divided with one another. God is there, but we have turned, in a sense, a blind eye to that presence of God sometimes, and we create our own gods. And part of it is, who will the real God stand up? And I think part of the Teilhardian challenge is, who is the God we confess belief in, every Sunday or whenever? Who is this living God? And so I think being challenged in the deepest core of our faith is really important, to know what we truly believe in and what we're willing to commit our lives to. And so that, is part of the conference as well. Coming to, we never can exhaust the mystery of God. And that's what we're saying. This God is ever new, is ever appearing in new ways. And amidst the complexities of our world, in every aspect of these complexities, is really important to find that hidden presence of God.
Mm. Well, talking about the ever newness and the hidden presence, I think we're saying something this year very new, and trying to get at something that might be shocking to some, right? So our theme this year is healing God, healing self, healing earth, the power of divine love in an evolving universe. And this might be a shocking idea to some, healing God. But as I know from talking to you in our discussions, without a true healing of our wounded concepts of God, is any real change possible?
Right. That well said. In other words, we have latched on for various reasons to sometimes partial understandings of God, sometimes when I say incorrect understandings, they're not really wrong. I think God is always an experience in our lives. But we cannot mistake, who God is by having, for example, a disregard for science and just thinking that maybe Plato and Aristotle had all the answers we need about God. Maybe we don't even want philosophy. Maybe we just say, no, the Bible tells us about God, and not only the Bible. And so when we start cutting things off and we say, this is what God is, we can rest assured we don't know what God is, because God is always that which eludes our grasp, even our attempts to know God in some complete way. And so in a world that is so divided, I think, as you say, our erroneous concepts of God, our erroneous images of God, have been at the source of our divisions. If I think that God is a white male grandfather who really just loves first white males above everything else, that will give rise to a sense of men are more important than women. They're more important, certainly, than animals or care for the earth. And maybe even if we want to do this, if God was white Western European, then we'd have to say that it's not just a male God, but a white male God, that reigns supreme. And while some may say, I don't think like that. Well, that thinking is deeply embedded in a lot of the ways we've interpreted the symbols of God, the language of God, holy God, holy, omnipotent, all powerful, all knowing, all loving. And we're like, wow, this is like, better, much better than the Matrix. This is like super. When in fact, the God of Jesus Christ was like emptied God's self to become one of us, a God who is servant, not really Lord, but a Lord's servant, not a God who's over us, but who's beneath us, a God who empowers us from within and not a power over to control us. And so I think we have a lot of, when I hear the language of God sometimes that's spoken, when I see some of the old practices, military practices that belong to an imperial court, I'm wondering, what God are we talking? Are we talking about the same God here? And so I do think a healing of God is necessary in our own age. And that's very challenging to a lot of people, because many will say, God doesn't need any healing. God is, all powerful, and God cannot be affected by us. And I'm saying, oh no, God has been deeply wounded by us.
Yeah.
And we must become conscious of those wounds and begin the work of healing through the power of love.
So it's not just our concept of God that's wounded, that we're talking about in this conference, but our concepts of self. And this is a challenge. You've talked about a good deal in your work, right? We are relational selves. It's important that we're part of a whole, and wholes that become wholes that become wholes. And it's important that we are our unique individual selves. That's why we're all here. But yet there's still a wound. What's the wound, Ilya?
Well, it does. I do think the human person is the most complex species alive on this planet today. And I've always said that the greatest mystery is not God, it's the human person. We are just an infinite mix of stuff. And I think the woundedness comes from, you might say, a disconnected ego or a disconnected self. And it comes out of the way, I think, in some ways, the way religion and science separated, over 500 years ago, the way modern philosophy and the way modern science, when it arose in the 17th and 18th century, said, now we can explain everything. We can name everything. We don't need God to say how this world works. And a lot of these factors, I think, gave rise to a very scared self. I think the modern person, grew into a very, on one hand, a successful person by hard work, but that hard work also came many times attached with an ethic that if you work hard and you're successful, God will bless you. So, be all you can be, get as wealthy as you can, do some good in the world, and you're going to go to heaven. And that's just bad thinking. It's just been unhelpful. And so we have a world where I think the divided self is the false self that Thomas Merton talks about, the self that is far from God, that God knows nothing of because God doesn't create that self. And so finding the true self is finding oneself as part of a whole. Because the beauty, and by a whole, again, it's not dissolving the self in something other than itself. In other words, the whole is like a big stained glass window. You can think of the stained glass window at the Notre Dame Cathedral, where the beauty of that window in its totality is each pane of glass, each separate cut with its unique cut and bevel, where light shines through it in a particular way that no other piece of glass really reflects that light in that particular way. That's the type of identity we're talking about in terms of human identity. Each person has a particular cut, the way the divine light shines through that person, that person radiates divinity in a unique way, but in a way as part of a whole where we begin to see this beauty and the goodness and the unity of divine love shining through all of our world.
That's marvelous. And I guess the part of the wound is that we don't realize that it's both, that we think it's just the cut or just the stained glass window and can't rest in that space, that between space of understanding that only by realizing them together that they truly are a whole, a Teilhardian whole.
Exactly. Well said. Exactly. It's precisely because the cut of my life is not the cut of you're cut differently. And yet together there's a complementarity of beingness, so that light shines through the being of two in a more radiant way than just one alone. And so without knowing ourselves as part of a whole, we're really isolated partials. And that is, I think, a deep source of our anxiety, of our struggle for existence today, of why we deplete the Earth's resources. We have a deep fear and anxiety of death, of nothingness, that if I don't acquire for myself all that I can, there's nothing else, because if I have no sense of a God of infinite divine light shining through the beauty of the whole, then I can't know myself as part of that whole. And so self-knowledge, therefore, is essential. Who am I? Then we enter into that question of who are you, oh God, when I can begin to enter into that question of my own beingness. I know that I am not an I apart from a you or a thou or a whole.
So healing Earth, one of maybe the central concept of this conference is that we can't truly begin to heal the Earth without healing God and healing ourselves. But of course, healing Earth is foremost to our minds in this event. You open Re-Enchanting the Earth with a very straightforward and honest reckoning with where we are with our natural world. And I wondered if you could just say some words about your concerns on the climate crisis and how this conference can help move us toward the healing that we need for our world.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I mean, look, this is our reality. We're living through still the COVID pandemic. It is certainly not over, as we see the news coming out of Europe and other places, that people are still dying from this deadly pathogen. And so, it is a question of, we're living now in a world, in an open world that's become more dense, more connected. And so, the possibilities of future pandemics is, on our horizon. It's a world where greed really supersedes need, right? So we have much more than we need. And by doing that, by acquiring for ourselves over and against others, we, in a sense, deprive others of some of the basic necessities of life because we have no consciousness of belonging together. And we have so many things in our culture, certainly here I'm talking about Western culture, that militates against wholeness. It really is about the power of the super individual, right? That I can become super smart, super wealthy, super fast, over and against you. And that type of thinking and that type of development is deadly. It has no future. And the cost of that deadly thinking is the life of the earth itself. Climate change is not getting better. For all the talking that's going on about Pope Francis's Laudato Si, all the conferences, all the many papers and dissertations that are written on climate change, nothing is changing because nothing is really impacting the very structures of our lives. And the fact is, unless we are really forced to change, we are not going to change. We like our lives as they are. And, and it's true, we're comfortable in our North American lifestyles. So why should I really be overly concerned about climate change? The sun is shining, the air is, I could still breathe air, life is good, we're going to celebrate Thanksgiving. I have much to be thankful for. Yes. But the truth is, this earth is suffering because of a mentality that's so partial, that's so individualized, that refuses, in a sense, to open up to a new paradigm of a God world earth becoming into something new. That this human community is not just my little life, that, that I do belong to something that the beauty of the rich cultures that are diverse around the earth, across the expanse of Africa, across the Middle East, across Asia, South America. And yet this beauty of diversity will be lost because as the earth begins to disintegrate, we're going to begin to see geological shifts. We're going to begin to see the seas rise, not only a species becoming extinct, but they are being depleted in a way they will never appear again. So unless we really wake up to this earth that is our home, that where God is doing new things, we can't even imagine the kind of weird and strange and world of suffering that we might anticipate up ahead. So the healing of God, the healing of self, and the healing of earth all belong together, in my view.
And you're saying we a lot and how we have to change. And a big part of this conference isn't just these ideas and these speakers and these practices, but this community that comes to this conference every year in increasing numbers. And I wonder whether you could talk a bit about what you hope the community will take with them from this conference. What would you like them to take home if our message gets through?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, well, we have a good lineup of speakers. We have a process theologian, a process philosopher, rather, Don Beingness, and Diarmuid O'Murchu has written quite a bit on evolutionary thinking and will speak about, living through a pandemic, COVID pandemic world and the question of healing itself. And Gail Worselow, Sister Gail Worselow, a disciple of Father Thomas Berry, and Lou Savory, who's really done so much work on Teilhard's thoughts and breaking them open for our everyday lives. And so, what we hope to do, first of all, there's several things. One, while we need to be deeply aware of the reality of our world, we can't live in fear and freeze in where we are. And so a coming together is to know we are not alone, that we belong to a whole, and the community that gathers reinforces the belief that, together we can create something new, something more than where we are. So I do think, community is about mutual support. It's about collaboration, a collaboration of ideas, a collaboration of vision. And therefore, my hope is that we get out of distrust and move into a new level of trust. And because where we trust life and the processes of life, then we're free to engage, to create, to do new things. I think oftentimes our fears weigh us down and they hold us back. Oh no, I don't want to do that. I'm afraid of what's going to happen. It's like, well, you should actually be afraid of what's going to happen because you're being held back, right? Let go, let God, and just let God be God and go with the flow, right? Because there's a lot of adventure of life that awaits us. And again, as we've said many times now in so many places, God is doing new things because God is creating, not just creator, but creating, right? And so the best of life is up ahead. But if we freeze, hold on, refuse to act, and want to grasp and control everything, the worst of life will be ahead. So we have a choice to make. And hopefully the conference will give us the light and the vision and the breath to choose life.
Hopefully they will join us this year, January 21st to 23rd, and choose to participate in this incredible event. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Ilya, so much for your time today.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for everything you've done and do.